How do we get rid of the tipping culture in America? My biggest issue is how 15 no longer seems like the standard. On the tip touch screens, it's often the minimum option. Same with pre-calculated tips on receipts. When leaving a tip, I start at 15 as my baseline and round up to a nicer number that probably results in 18-20. Not to mention the takeout or minimal service places that still ask for a tip. Depending on the circumstances, I do much less or $0. Recently, I went to a fancy restaurant in my city, and the server was pretty bad. When the check came, the tip was automatically included party of 2. I realized why they didn't try the hard. Apparently 20 is the norm now. But I used to surf, and I'll die on the hill that 15 rounded up to the nearest dollar is more than fine. 20 is if they did something above and beyond. Any fast food place that asks for a tip, I won't ever return to, and I'll leave a review stating why. Same goes for any restaurant that has hidden fees included forced gratuity for 2 fucking people. I go out to eat as a treat. Nothing ruins that more than the feeling that the restaurant is trying to swindle me. I live in Japan now. No tipping. It's one of the best parts of living here. If you get rid of tipping, the resulting higher wages for wait staff get baked into the price of the meal. Except now you have no option to choose your end price based on quality of service. I will never understand why people are clamoring for reduced control over payment options. On average, you'll pay the same, but staff will have no incentive to give you good service. Doesn't make any sense. I suspect the main reason Americans want to get rid of tipping is they can't do math. Make it like Europe, where there is barely any tipping in place. Services 15 included, not lower, not higher. Taxes included too. No surprise when you receive the bill. It is too expensive. You don't go there or come back, and no expectations that you will tip on top except like €1 for a sit-in coffee place, restaurant, or more for a very fancy restaurant. This 15 is the price of the job being done, and the waiter can even be offended if you give a big tip. Make tips optional is 1, which is the strangest thing having to say. With that I mean, default to 0, optional is when the user selects it. Make business owners pay their employees a wage as if tipping doesn't exist. Tips are tips. They are not business funds to keep your business running. They are tips for the waiters as a group divided or the waiter directly. The restaurant itself should not take any part of the tip ever. It's not the server tipping culture I want to change. They seem to prefer it. It's the fact that I'm prompted to leave a tip after pouring myself a cup of coffee out of the airpot at the cafe across the street, or how I'm prompted to leave a tip before receiving the service, like when I tip DoorDash or Uber Eats 20 so they can just leave my food at some random address. That is the kind of tipping that needs to die off. I have the answer. Someone posted on another thread a receipt from a restaurant that gets rid of tips and shows that they actually pay staff well and provide benefits so no one feels bad not tipping. The more restaurants that do this, the more accepted and desired it will become. People hate tipping anyway. Give them an option not to and they'll take it. Shift the responsibility back to the restaurant owners. Just need a law that disallows tipping from in any way counting towards an employee's wage. By this I mean regardless if the employee got tipped $10 that day or $300, the employer still has to pay them the agreed hourly rate. This would disincentivize the business from pushing for tips, and the customer would no longer need to consider their holding back on the tip as preventing the employee from being able to survive. It's not going to be by refusing to pay people to work for you. That's for sure. Also, the very way you phrase the question shows you have zero interest in making work better for servers. All you care about is not being judged for not tipping. So yeah, good luck trying to make life worse for other people so eating out can be cheaper for you. Don't tip unless you have a dedicated server and only after service has been provided. Tipping ahead of service is literally just paying more for the same product and goes against the reason for tipping in the first place. Tipping is meant to show appreciation for exceptional service, which can only be judged once service is complete. Tackling the tipping culture in America is like trying to change a tire on a moving car. It's deeply ingrained, and the whole system relies on it. Perhaps a radical shift to fair wages for service industry workers would be the game changer, making tipping less obligatory and more of a genuine appreciation for exceptional service. People would have to get over their feeling of guilt and just stop tipping. It would force employers to pay to attract talent. I've reduced my tipping to compensating for labor. How much do I think bringing to plates, to drinks, and a refill is worth, regardless of the meal value? I think that might be worth $3, $8. Jesus Christ. Is this the problem in the world you want to solve? This is what you want to organize around. Just tip like normal and do something even slightly important with your efforts to change the world. Like between tipping and for-profit healthcare. Which American tradition bothers you more? Escaping the tipping culture in America is like trying to unmix a cocktail. One way could be pushing for fair wages for service industry workers, so tipping becomes more of a gesture of appreciation rather than a necessity. It's a cultural shift that needs both patrons and businesses to shake things up. You're gonna pay the fucking staff no matter what. Restaurants are a notoriously tough business. His idea that if we don't tip, restaurants will have to pay their staff directly, and maybe the fat cat owners will have to move out of their mansions into slightly smaller mansions stuff is nonsense. Servers say they want a living wage, and you think that's all they want. They want a living wage, then tons of tips on top. Raising wages for servers won't get rid of tip culture like Euro. People are greedy at every level in the US, from the billionaires to the small restaurant servers. In Seattle, we've mostly gotten rid of it by paying servers actual wages. Yeah, it had a slight increase in prices to do that, but compared to before, the overall cost is slightly lower, assuming you tipped about 20. Pay everyone living wages. Don't expect the customers to solve it. You can't change the tipping scenario at restaurants, but you certainly can avoid it by not eating out at sit-down restaurants or going out to bars. That's the only places where not tipping is an asshole move. So if you have a major objection to tipping, there's your solution. Tipping culture benefits the cheap and punishes the generous. And I say this as someone who depends on my tips for a living. I'd prefer we end all tipping tomorrow and go to a flat fee and just raise everyone's salary. But until that happens, it's needed to keep us going. Allow restaurants to charge around $30 more for food. The only way most of them can stay afloat right now is cutting costs on payroll by shorting wait staff. You don't do that. Almost every sit-down restaurant shuts down. Profit margins are too slim in that industry. Update menu prices to 20 higher and give that to the servers. A daily commission based on sales, just like any other sales job out there. As a bottle server, I pull down about $600 a night. Put that in my paycheck instead, and I'll be perfectly okay with no tips. Stop tipping. Workers won't want to work for slave wages. Slave wage employers go out of business, as they should. All is right with the world. It's really that simple. You don't need government intervention to tell you to stop tipping. WTF. Just stop tipping. Stop tipping. It's literally the only practical way. Yes, the servers will take the L in the short term, but in a matter of months the restaurants will have to give them actual wages. Everyone would quit for another job. Short-term pain, long-term gain. The thing servers won't admit is they don't want it to go away, because they make a lot of money on our tips. It's not even about a lower hourly wage anymore. They want to keep making more per hour than they would even if the minimum wage was raised. I hate the tipping culture. I get tipping at sit-down restaurants, but I order a bottled water at Starbucks, and I tip for that. I pick up takeout and I am asked to tip. I still do to help the workers, but I'd rather just pay a flat price. The restaurant will have to pay 30 cents an hour and go up $15 on your dinner. I own a restaurant for 30 years, just sold it and retired. The wait staff deserves everything they get. If you're so damn cheap, get takeout or get a real job. You don't. The overwhelming majority of servers make way more money with tips than the restaurants would ever pay them in wages. I started in a cheap corporate restaurant 10 years ago, and I was making $20, $25 an hour after taxes. Everyone here is focusing on service. Tipping for good service at a sit-down restaurant is the least objectionable part of tipping culture. It's people soliciting tips for every damn other thing that's the problem. It's very, very simple. You all need to stop tipping, full stop. When it hits the waiters, waitresses hard, and they start pushing for better pay, then things have a higher chance of changing for the better. Simple. Don't play. And I don't mean not eating out. Do not tip for services that do not demand the tip. Do not tip at a kiosk that is asking for a tip before service is rendered. Just hit zero. Restaurant owners have to add the tip into the bill, then advertise that you are not expected to tip. Servers still make a decent living and people stop bitching and getting confused over tipping. You'd have to get the servers on board. And honestly, good luck with that. Most any place more upscale than a Waffle House. Servers make pretty good money. They like the model the way it is. The service people a living wage. If your business model is based on tips being used to compensate for you fucking over your employees, then you shouldn't be in business. Change the law and make businesses pay them a living wage. You will never get people to just stop tipping. There are about a dozen reasons why changing the law is the only way. Stop referring to it as tipping culture and realize it requires a restructuring of the entire service industry and an actual, livable, scaling with inflation minimum wage. If 90 of the PPL stop tipping, the servers will mass quit and it will create a supply problem that restaurant owners will be forced to address by increasing wages. Nothing short of federal legislation will make a difference. Servers don't want it to go away, especially at higher-end places. You can make a lot of money on tips. How about we start paying people who work in the service industry a living wage, so that the tip really is just a reward for great service, like it should be. If I'm not sitting with a menu, I have no problem hitting $0 on the pause, except for the hibachi place. I will tip them to just because it is that good.